All right. So, welcome everyone to another episode of Notes from the Aleph. And Aleph's a high point from which all things are visible, and from our vantage point, we'll be looking at tabletop role-playing games, their design, and the theory behind those designs. Around here, our motto is to be fair, build up, and have fun. I'm your host, GriffinVarro, joined by our editor Theta, local designer Norman Rafferty, and our good friends and GMs RedRabbit and Lesson Learned. When it comes to tabletop role-playing games, I have 15 years of experience writing, playing, and frequently fixing problematic rules at the table. Pronouns he, him, they, them. Lessons, why don't you go next?
Yes, I'm a writer over at Amazon and Nights and Starts. I'm also the Sunday GM for the Practice Channel, running Greyhawk Into the Wild Coast 5th Edition Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm also a streamer at Lessons Learned 1 on YouTube, on Twitch, and Lessons Learned on YouTube. My pronouns are he, him.
All right, Red.
Okay, I'm RedRabbit. I'm currently running our Wednesday game of Ironclaw 2nd Edition, though we didn't get to it this week, sadly, but I'm still doing it. I'm a lover of tabletop role-playing games. I'm trying to experiment with a couple more of them, and I consider myself a student of narrative design and of game design.
And last but not least, Norman Rafferty.
Hello, world. I'm Norman Rafferty, he, him. I work for Sanguine Games. I think the most horrible thing that we ever did was that, it was using the half ton of dust of dehydration to destroy an entire druid village because it was strategically necessary, and I would defend the decision.
Yes.
That's a horrible way to go, man.
The Nuremberg defense of D&D, yes.
No, I wasn't following orders. I said we should do it.
Were they evil-aligned druids?
They were not aligned with my emperor, therefore
that's
evil.
Yeah, that counts.
Let's do some story time then. Let's actually start it off. So, way back when I first started reading AD&D monster manuals, I came across the organization entries for various monsters. It's such a neat idea. Here's how many you might expect in a small group, if they're even found alone, and oh look, it'll even tell you how many non-combatants are in a tribe, like your druids, and their experience value. Certainly, these two things have no relationship to each other at all. But if we fast track a couple of years, when I'm playing in some of my first campaigns, things became pretty clear once players started earnestly suggesting burning down villages of helpless commoners for the experience. Whether it's goblin children or unsuspecting villagers, there's mechanical stance of these games to put a target on NPCs and create your own war crimes. So today we're going to talk about all those fun war crimes and the moral and ethical stance of killing kids in your RPGs. So, isn't Dust of Dryness 2,000 gold a pop? How'd you get half a ton of it?
We had, to predicate some of this, so this was actually D&D 3. And so, but a GM but there's a really, they made a D&D 3 book for this. We weren't actually running the Black Company, which is one of my favorite fantasy series, because the theory behind Black Company is it's basically a D&D party, but they work for the evil queen. And the reason why they work for the evil queen is because the undead evil king would be worse.
Fair enough.
And she would send them to do evil things. So some of the things they do are, to me, hilarious. Because there's people in the party who are just neutral. There's people in the party who are focused, the means justifies the ends. And then there's the wizards who are just horrible people. But
justifies everything kind of characters,
right? And it's a great series to read because there's a lot of in it of it's a mature story. It's written from the POV of people who are here to get stuff done, and even though some of them are horrible and will do things for a lark, I think a big problem that we run into in a lot of modern gaming is the idea of evil versus evil, because like a game like Dungeons and Dragons will let you label yourself evil, but what the heck does that mean? I mean, what's evil? Are well, this is where we're being streamed. So I'm like, horrible. Like, are people who commit horrible sex offenses evil? But I mean, like anyone who plays D&D will tell you, no, that's not what we mean. No.
It's
not
not
even
your
those
local
people's
baker who
confused.
charges a bit too much evil. I mean, he is. The paladin can detect he's evil. Does that mean we should murder him?
Well, communists are evil. We all know that they're against money, and anyone against money. I mean, like these are things that like you're not supposed to talk about. But it's funny because Dungeons and Dragons is still the only game that forces players to choose good, neutral, or evil, and write it on your sheet for everyone to see. But that's not what we're talking about. And also the way, I mean, the thing I've already expressed issue about is like the way a lot of the materials are phrased. Like the adventures that you buy are not written with this. Like you go back to the old school adventures, like Tomb of Horrors. A king tells all of you to go into a dungeon and raid it. Like a lot of this stuff is Expedition of the Berry Peaks. Go to this place and kill all these people and come back. You could be good, you could be evil, but we're sending a bunch of you to go to a place and fetch thing. You could be of any alignment. A lot of the modern stuff that you read, like Dragon Heist or Tyranny of the Dragon Queen or some of the Candlekeep adventures, assume that you're going to help other people who are distressed, that you're at least neutral and possibly good, but definitely not evil. Like I think didn't I already mention this? Like Tyrant Queen wants us to defend Waterdeep. Waterdeep.
Right, and I think one of the other adventures, like Lost Mines of Houndelver, assumes that you want to stay and help the village, and that you're probably going to get paid for it too, just in case you didn't want to.
Right. I do remember a few times, Gargags, especially the opening of the Slavers, the first Slaver adventure, where literally the words, the forces of weal fighting the forces of woe. And it was assumed that your characters were hired at least weal. They necessarily weren't to be good, but the good guys, the good aligned races, the elves, the dwarves, humans. I don't know why humans were there, but still. And we're sending you to deal with the bad guys, which were the orcs, the kobolds, the ogres, the trolls.
Oh, you're forgetting the insect queen. Slavers introduces the Aspis. But on the other hand, that's specifically the king is hiring you because these guys are slavers. They're raiding my land and stealing my people. It wouldn't matter if the king was good, neutral, or evil. My people disappearing is bad, no matter how you slice it. If I was the orc king and the humans were coming by and stealing my orcs for slaves, still bad. Yeah. So I'm not.
We split on like the good and evil stuff. Like it really is a matter of like, so what side are you on, and how did they define that?
Right. I mean, you even Wolf, the Spider Queen that everybody's talking about. That is from you start with the giants are invading, and the giants keep beating the crap out of us, and we want that to stop. And you discover this long series of dungeons that leads up to the Spider Queen sponsoring the raids in the first place. So you can still be evil and do all of this. But that's kind of where I think the problem came in, where like early D&D, they had charts so you could generate XP. Like they said, if you kill things, you get experience points for them. Here's the chart. They had two charts, XP for killing things and XP for treasure. And so what would happen was the players would sit there and go, well, there's like, the adventure, which was written by somebody whose narrative said there's like, orc children here. 7 orc children. I think it's Zeb Cook. That's the first time I saw it was in Zeb Cook's Dwellers of Forbidden City. It says, well, of course there's, this is a tribal village, so there's people in it. And it mentions there's women and children. And of course the players would sit there and go, well, what do we do with them? We can't feed them. We can't take them with us. We just killed all the men. And the book says they're worth experience points if we kill them. So why wouldn't we?
Right. And there's no like guidance at all in the books about this. Like, what do you do with 50 to 100 non-combatants? Are you supposed to take away their weapons and roll like 50 rounds of slaughtering them? Which, terrible idea, never do that.
Well, in reality, you look at your character sheet. And if your character sheet said you were evil or possibly neutral, then you might just kill them. I mean, this is something
you're good and they're all evil. The book even says all orcs are always evil, therefore it's good for us to kill them even if they're completely helpless.
Right, and that's something
where our problem with all this comes from.
And that's something I will never shut up about, that D&D 4 said don't play evil characters, and people were so mad that D&D 5 says you can be as evil as you want.
But then you had mechanics that told you that they were evil. Like you had your paladin who could detect evil at will, and his or theirs charge was to destroy evil. So it's
Yeah,
like,
you know,
and the
it's really weird that D&D 5 took out the ability to detect evil. So evil's still a quality that you write down on everybody, but there's no way to know if someone's good or evil in D&D 5.
You only know if they're undead, if they're a demon, or I think aberration, maybe. It depends.
And I want to point out that
Ultimately-
D&D 5 adds the Warlock as a standard class, and it specifically says under Warlock, you kill things in the names of your masters. So if you were playing a Warlock correctly, of course you would kill children.
I have an anecdote because I had a player who loved playing warlocks, and he was excited. I forget, it might have been in Tasha's, but there were new warlock patrons. There was a warlock patron that was like the Fathomless, right? Which was basically this like ancient water spirit or god or something like that. It was a water-themed warlock build, which was cool, and he was into that, and he was making kind of like a shamanistic character based on that premise. And I was sitting there going like, okay, yeah, so what is this? I think, and obviously a lot of people don't bother to play this way. I think if you're going to play a warlock, your patron needs to have some sort of like personality or tangibility in the story. So I was thinking, what does this fathomless creature want? It wants people to be drowned. It wants like sacrifices, right? And it became very clear very early that like, no, that is not at all what he had in mind for this character. And we talked about it and we worked stuff out about it because, that's what you got to do to make sure that people are having fun. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how the game is full of these preconceptions, and the game is full of evil and good within a context. And I think when people read the words evil and good, they feel the need to map it onto their personal preconceptions of what is evil and good, divorced from a setting or a time period or a separate reality. And I think that's where things start to get very muddled very quickly. So I don't blame 5e for taking them out, and I think they should have renamed the spell, but for trying to attach that to more meaningful mechanical things and tags like aberrations, demonic forces, things like that.
Well, I see, because I've been seeing some of the debate about this, whether evil should be in there. But I blame D&D 5 for letting players be evil, because it's like people complain that D&D 4 said don't let your players be, and then D&D 5 says yes, which means that's what I call a toxic rule. Like the player could show up and say the book said I could be evil, and it's written by professionals. I didn't pay $34.95 or whatever for a book that's written by amateurs. It says right there, world's greatest game, right there on the cover. Who are you?
Or even worse, they say like the game says I need experience to level up, and it says I get experience by killing, and here's a bunch of killable things. I'm playing the game correctly.
The warlock even says in their description, kill in their name. It's,
Well,
I think I got to say, first of all, we're going back to the intro. It's the reward structure. What do you reward? And some people say, well, there's I don't know what they call it now, where essentially automatically you level up if you do something. Milestone, which I thought it was a great idea originally, but then I soured on it. Seems to be too arbitrary. Like, oh, yeah, you do. What happens if I spend 10 days in the market? Oh, didn't do the milestone, so no XP for you. But I role play. I spent time. I did things.
We could have the milestone discussion, but I'm going to make it a long discussion, so we probably shouldn't.
Well, and also. Basically, like the modern Dungeons and Dragons says that you only get experience points if the fight was a challenge. So you can't do the trick of pouring boiling oil or blowing up the dungeon. Like that was a joke that showed up in more than one comic strip. Of what if we just seal the dungeon shut and starve everyone, or what if we collapse it using a dig or excavation spell, or Matic of the Titans and crushed everyone inside? Doesn't that count as killing them? And sure, the treasure's destroyed, but this took 10 minutes at no risk to me. I'm not going to the Tomb of Horrors. You must be nuts. So just bury it there. Problem solved, boss.
Yeah. So I think,
oh my gosh,
like I was trying to say, basically, it's one of them is a reward structure. Another one's motivation, because I think that's the word we haven't really talked about, and particularly. I think it would have been cool, and maybe there's some, left of DNA from the very beginning, that the intent was to challenge the players morality. In other words, you have these situations where players have to make the decision. But my problem is,
I completely disagree.
I mean, it would have been ideal, but no. Instead, you got the mechanics up till recently that says, well, my character is a paladin. I lose my powers if I don't kill the kobold kids that radiate evil.
The problem is in modern D&D 5, you can be a chaotic evil paladin, so that's meaningless.
Exactly.
For in some versions of D&D, they had alignment restrictions. You have to be good to be a paladin. You have to be evil to be an assassin, and those were like descriptor tags. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
You can't be both a paladin and an assassin at the same time.
What's the game? I'm blanking out on the name, but it is a very famous game. I think it's by Avalon Hill. I think, which is the Knights of the Round Table are
Pendragon.
Legend. Pendragon doesn't have alignment, but it does have a system where you have to play up. Your
Pendragon didn't have skills. Pendragon originally didn't have skills, but it had a listing of different qualities, different size, because there would be, deity versus worldliness, or might versus mercy. And so if you were high in one category, you were low in the other. And then when you had to do things in the game, you'd have to roll against it. Like if you want to lie to somebody, that's a worldly quality. So if you have a high pious rating, you're all good in faith and paladin-like and good. So you have difficulty lying to people or prevaricating. Likewise, if you wanted to be, or I think it was justice and mercy are the two opposites. If someone came and gave you a sob story and said, "Oh no, I had to steal that bread to feed my family," but you have a high justice score and a low mercy score, you would go, "Well, I'm sorry, Jean Valjean, you're going to jail with everybody else."
Yeah.
But Pendragon was very much a game about Knights of the Dinner Table and morality. I mean, like a huge problem with Dungeons and Dragons, especially the modern versions, is D&D still clings to the idea of labeling things evil, so it's okay to kill them. Like that's why we're like some people are commenting about it's okay to kill the children; they're evil, and you can see this in the D&D books. Like demons are always evil, but angels can be of any alignment. And that's so you could label them evil and then feel good about killing them. I think it's funny that D&D has moved from calling animals neutral, which meant that they had, nothing, and saying they're unaligned because animals aren't smart enough to choose to be evil anymore. So, because that was bothering people, that animals
Imagine who.
They can't choose to be neutral.
Yeah.
And so
it's the all dogs go to heaven argument all over again.
Yep. Well, this gets a little darker, like something I've seen in modern D&D. This started showing up in 4th edition, which was there is a problem with player characters of what do you do with the survivors? And I can tell you what you do with the survivors after the fight. The answer is nothing. There are never survivors. Everyone fights to the death all the time.
But you don't bury the survivors.
Yes. Which side will ever bury the survivors? Because I've seen it in the adventures where every time you kill the bad guys, they have a comprehensive letter on their corpse that explains, that addressed from their master, who writes their full name out.
Yes.
And details the entire. Now, remember, we're going to go ahead and do this huge evil plan. As you know, we have to go ahead and align all this stuff. Make sure you carry this letter on you at all times and just don't leave it in the desks or locked chests somewhere. So that way, when people kill you, they can pull this out and find this written in common because I can't be bothered to use our secret abyssal language or cryptic code.
Yeah.
Signed Lord Evil. And
as opposed to a letter saying, do the thing.
Right. So
you already know what you're supposed to be doing because that's what you delegated the task to do.
Which is
an evil congratulation letter. Good job on burning down the village. This is your certificate for $5 off at Evil Mart.
In fact, this gets into a huge problem. Like, oh my God, this is gonna be the worst stream we've ever had. Okay, the bad guys would kill our children. Okay, so why wouldn't we kill their children? And now we're into
there you go.
Now it got really dark, didn't it?
Yeah.
Incredibly.
But that's just a moral challenge, and the D&D even today doesn't support the idea of a moral challenge.
it's D&D 5 is so bizarrely not interested in it. Like earlier versions of D&D, like D&D 1 and 2 would have discussions of what does it mean to be good? And D&D 3rd said, no, it's just an elemental quality, guys. Like good and evil are tangible physical properties of the universe.
Yeah.
And then
Right,
D&D
and when we think about like stories, like half the point of having a story is that they are in a way a morality play. They have a point and arguably some sort of moral points to make in them. And so when you take that entirely out, the story becomes pointless.
Wait, what D&D stories are you talking about? What's the morality?
I'm not
tale
talking
of
about
Two
D&D
Hearts?
stories. I'm talking about stories in general tend to have a point, but when you come to D&D, they lose the point because there's no moral question or anything to really learn about them.
I mean, I'm going to invoke Redwall, which is one of my favorite series, which is a bunch of people trying to enslave each other. And the bad guys in Redwall are often, bad. Like, we want to enslave your children. We don't want to kill your children. We want to enslave them, which makes more sense. They've got small hands. They can do the fine work. But Redwall is also a series notorious for not offering anyone any mercy. When they get to that, you've got small children killing people, and it's played for laughs. It's I mean, we keep talking like I also want to emphasize the reason why we're talking about D&D today is because Dungeons and Dragons and its forks like Pathfinder is the only role-playing game that has good and evil as provisions in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other games, all the other Call of Cthulhu, Traveler, RuneQuest, Rollmaster, all the other ones don't do this. Only D&D feels obligated, and only Gary Gygax's advanced D&D, because that's what makes it advanced. Basic D&D was just lawful and chaotic. That wasn't enough. You had to write down good or evil. Good old biodeterminist Gary Gygax put that in there.
So advanced.
Right. I mean, and also when people talk about MMOs as reductive, this is also, I just have to mention this real quick. Like people say, we don't need D&D to be like an MMO. It's a mere MMO. It's like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV have much better moral questions and moral quandaries that have deeper impacts and politics and complexity than freaking D&D.
Oh yeah. I mean, as much as I could probably rag on WoW, I could at least say its story is probably about something in each of its expansions and such. There's a point to them.
Yeah, although there's also an aspect of actually modern video games, which is what I call the great moral vastness, where everybody is bad and therefore nobody's really good, and I have issues with that, but I don't want to go into that. Yeah,
I would go into failure of writing.
But I think a lot of other games they don't have alignment because in many ways they say we don't need it. We make it. If you're playing Star Wars and you're playing for the Rebels, you're the good guys, unless you're playing Rogue One, right? And you're still the good guys, right? But if you're playing something like Conan, survival of the fittest, right? It's a harsh world. I gotta survive. Conan was a thief and he was a former slave and he was going to survive. So if you're going to help somebody, fine. But he was going to, first of all, he was going to survive.
I mean, if you're going to bring up Star Wars, there's always everyone's favorite argument of what about everyone who worked on the Death Star? And this is actually something that's related to this moral quandary, which is the idea of trying to solve a problem without killing anyone. Because that's a huge problem in a game like Dungeons and Dragons. There's been I've had situations in D&D where I would go up to the bad guy and say, what will it take to get you to leave? And he would say 10,000 in gold. I would say done. And GMs with their jaws would hit the floor. What kind of player gives up money? It's what else is money good for if I can't end horror?
Get a treat, treat or something.
Yeah, I can just if I can just pay these guys money and pay them off. What else am I gonna do with it? You could buy magic items, just like that. My alignment's good. Why would I not solve a problem without killing anyone? But the problem is if you show up at a D&D game and start asking questions like how can we solve this without killing, you will almost always be the buzzkill.
Right.
Because every adventure is written with the idea that you will kill everyone, and GMs don't quite understand that. It's why wouldn't you kill the orcs? Pause for effect. They're evil.
they don't even assume you might not fully kill someone and then want to ask them a question.
I
So
mean,
they're expressly not considering possibilities.
right. I mean, it's well because D&D originally had language rules on the theory that we were killing them because we didn't speak a language in common. But now that we can speak common languages with them and pause and say, "Hey, I speak Orcish. Let's ask what their terms are for surrender." No, that's not something you would do. When you kill them, the note will be written in common.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because when you talk about it like that, it becomes clear that we're discussing a storytelling format that has outgrown and is overflowing the boundaries of the genre conventions that birthed it, right? Like, it is very clear to me when you sit down to play a medieval fantasy game that it is not, the good is only relativistic. It's good from the perspective of a floundering civilization that is beset on by actual monsters that are actually trying to kill and eat them, right? You don't need to qualify it. You don't need to try to pull that into a modern world, into our modern conceptions of good and evil, because we are not under threat of being eaten by monsters. It's a completely different, at its fundamental core, the setting premise for real world versus for any one of these games is so fundamentally different that, like, the very idea of trying to correlate those things is a little bit mind-boggling to me.
Well,
But when people
But are
approach
they
the game, they
really?
don't.
But are they really? Because often the way, eventually, many like Forgotten Realms, for example, Greyhawks, and it's like it's a world adventure. You're an adventure party. You're just gonna go out there and have fun. You're gonna, you're not the dreary mercenary standing, waiting for the nameless horde of whatever
Well,
who's
no,
gonna
but
kill everybody. If that was a setting, if you were playing, say, the Warriors in Greyhawk, maybe some aspects of Dragonlance at some point, then you would do that. But say you're playing Forgotten Realms, so you go from village to village, you go city to city, or inside the city. It's like, hey, who has a job for me? And okay, I'm going to kill somebody.
I see what you're saying, but I think that fundamentally, though, that's a good example of people not understanding the fiction that they consume, right? Like, Indiana Jones is the good guy, and he's fighting Nazis. They're the bad guys. The rebels are the good guys of Star Wars. But all of this, I pulled a bunch of George Lucas fiction, but all of this fiction is fundamentally from the perspective of post-World War II America, where we have a lot of serious prejudices and preconceptions about what makes someone good and what makes someone bad.
Well,
and I realize I'm spinning out into like a whole ethical thing here.
I want to build on, because people ask like what is this? And honestly, this is going to go back to what I always call the Uncharted issue, which is people play these games to have fun. And so, like, you'll get like the Nathan Drake Uncharted video game where everyone runs at you suicidally and you kill them. And I want to point out that D&D didn't used to be like that. Like, for example, the Lolth, the Spider Queen, that all starts with when you go to the Hill Giant setting, where we're going to go fight the Hill Giants because they keep enslaving stuff. And there is a slave revolt going on in the original first edition adventure of a bunch of orcs who are slaves to the giants, and they hate the giants, and if you can talk to them and convince them these creatures are always evil, they could side with you to help you defeat the hill giants. A provision written in the adventure by even freaking Gary Gygax himself.
That's very cool.
Right,
but my point goes deeper than that. That's interesting because it frames the world.
I got some more to build on this. Like I want to point out, like, that's written into their adventure, that kind of moral ambiguity. Now, if we fast forward today, there's the big controversy about Candlekeep, which had a quest where you go to islands and try to solve a Yuan-ti problem, or UNT, how you pronounce it. And the adventure writer discovered that after they published the adventure, it used to be that you went there and found both neutral UNT and evil ones, and you could possibly persuade the neutral ones to ally with you to help you against them. And the editors of the world's greatest role-playing game remove the camp you could parlay with and streamline the adventure so all you do is kill the Yuan-ti and presumably their women and children. I mean, they deleted that consciously as a choice.
Yeah,
and that's what we're back to kill the they probably don't have the women and children in there. They're probably coincidentally everyone's a combatant. Everyone's trying to kill you. But that's the kind of reductiveness that we're talking about because I think they were worried that kind of moral ambiguity would sap the energy or confuse people or whatever, but they got rid of it. Is like the important thing. And modern Dungeons and Dragons in its modern incarnation, and as we're doing this, they're scrubbing alignments hastily out of the book. They just published an errata for the book that removes a lot of it. Is because they want to keep that kind of simplistic fantasy attitude that you mentioned. But to be honest, like the D&D didn't used to have that. That's new. That's especially new to the current versions of D&D, that they're that reductive.
I mean, I guess the thing that I'm trying to get at, because I see what you're saying, that we're going back, that we're actually getting less progressive as D&D is going forward in a argument for simplicity or something. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that people, if I took a sword and stabbed my neighbor, that would largely be considered an evil act, regardless of what was going on. But within the confines of all of these things, of all of these fictions that we consume, we're pretty much okay with the fact that violence is going to happen. We're pretty much okay with the fact that you can make a blanket assumption that that violence is going to be justified in some way that we don't have to worry about or think about, whether that's alignment telling us it's okay, or the knowledge that Indiana Jones is keeping the Nazis from gaining immortality, whatever it takes, like that's fine. And to me, and maybe this is just an inflexibility on my part, but to me, there's a perceived hypocrisy there where I can't get over, if you want to follow this ethical debate to its conclusion for me, I have to say that, like, listen, we're talking about fantasy and fiction. We're talking about things that may be distasteful, but are specifically divorced from reality, because your D&D politics can never match your real world politics. Unless you truly believe that evil dictators should be killed by bands of scrappy vigilantes with swords. Like, maybe
that's the morally right thing in real life right there.
Right? But that's my point.
What
like,
that's a revolution.
People want to use these stories, like this genre, to tell ethical stories. This genre, in its inception and was never ethical. Like, it's ethical, but like it's a power fantasy. The reason it's a power fantasy is because you get to cut goblins' heads off with axes. Well, and people found more in that than just that. But
that's an agreement. I think that we'll have to put in a pin on that, because that is the question of fiction versus reality, and how fiction affects in any way, shape, or form, or doesn't affect in any way, shape, or form our reality. It's both a reflection of what we think at any one moment, and also how we play it, right? Well, because you can make the argument, yes, I've been in so many games like, well, in the Middle Ages, people witches are. Oops, that didn't mean that. Yeah, go ahead, Rafferty.
Well, I was going to say let's move away from reality and talk about the inspirations of Dungeons and Dragons, because so you've got, like, obviously Tolkien, and Tolkien had some moral ambiguity going on, because you have Saruman, who says, "Oh no, the best way to save the entire world is to make me the dictator," and the idea that in their world there wasn't good and evil, there's just evil. And, it's if you use power, it corrupts you, and you have no choice. You have to get away from it. Then you had Conan, which was a savage world where might makes right. I mean, Conan is just fighting. You had Lankbar, which is a huge influence on D&D, which is dark as crap, where, like, literally that's almost where everything wants to kill you. You had Jack Vance's Dying Earth, which, oh my God, if you read that, I've had people like quit reading the books going, they're so everyone's a horrible, despicable person. It's like, yep, this is where D&D comes from. It's like everyone's screwing everyone else to get treasure and stuff like that. There's a lot of and then, like,
the Eternal Champion. The Eternal Champion
series, which is about law versus chaos. There's no good or evil in there, and there's certain, law represents both stability but also control and totalitarianism, and chaos represents free will but also rapacity and crime. And and then you have balance, which is in the middle, which once again, these were interesting philosophical arguments. And Game of Thrones, written by a gamer, also built on that. And people were talking about Game of Thrones, it's so adult. But moving from there, these were arenas of moral ambiguity built into the stuff. And then you have like World of Warcraft, where they have Alliance and the Horde, where you've got the Tauren joining the Horde because the Alliance are too racist. And I don't know what's going on in Final Fantasy. I would have to go play that. But you had all this stuff that were interesting questions writ large in fantasy, written for an adult market and then later a young adult market, and all these sorts of interesting questions. And this is where D&D comes from. Everyone always talks about these inspirations. And yet, for some reason, bam, lately D&D decided that, and I really think it's because of the video games, that people, because modern D&D is defined as we have to kill everyone. I'm quoting old school adventures where you didn't have to kill everyone. They had provisions written in there by freaking Gygax of all people that have provisions for this is what they would do if they surrendered. These are terms. This is how you can negotiate with this. You could find a way out of some of these problems without violence. But and the reason why you do them in D&D is because they freaking kill you. Because D&D you can just randomly die in any fight. Not because they're not worth any XP. D&D 1 didn't even have story rewards. And now modern D&D, which does have story rewards, and you can just get XP just by moving the plot, has become very reductive. We can continue to point to modern examples. All of this talk about bioessentialism alignments disappeared in 3rd edition and came back in 5th. And it's in the published adventures where they keep putting evil on all the bad guys. And they want you to feel good about it while also not answering those questions. Like you just said about the Warlock, they added a class that gets material benefits from murder, but it's okay to murder.
Yeah.
Right, and it becomes expressly concerning when this company that's writing them expressly doesn't understand why some of the things they write could be problematic, then puts out a blanket ban on everything they've ever written, but then continues to define what they think is good or evil.
Yeah, it's
uncritically.
It's the hypocrisy of the errata where they had to errata out saying, no, orcs aren't inherently evil because originally before that they got the D&D publishers got into hot water, when they said, well, of course orcs are stupid and ignorant. They're evil and no one would ever want to be one.
And then...
And then a population said, hey, I'm tired of playing the elf and the dwarf and the human. So wouldn't it be cool if I could take this other character? And then they said, oh, but this character as written is too simple. So I'm going to add depth and perspective, and I'm going to play them against type, which I'm sorry is not actually that creative because it's been happening literally since the invention of
Wait a second. Are you saying this entire species is maligned by society at large? I feel maligned at society at large.
I'm going to pull out a trump card from the original discussion. Orcs aren't real, right? They're just made up, right?
No.
So they can be, and that's why you're seeing an identity crisis currently, because like D&D so wants to put everything in a box, but they don't know what to do with orcs currently. They want to make them I hate using this phrase, noble savages and give them super primal powers because
I have problems with that too.
Well, it's because they don't know what to do with them.
They don't. Well,
but I think ultimately what we're talking about is something very different. We're talking about let's talk about the company. We're talking about the people who are making it, publishing. They want D&D to be the game for everybody, and it basically is going to boil down to you cannot please all the people all the time.
Well, but then why would they errata out alignment? And the answer to that is because that pleases more people. I mean, I'm always fond of saying okay, why is this rule here and who is using it? And it's like the reason why did they go so hard on alignment in D&D 5? Like D&D 4 said evil things are to be killed and you're all good or neutral. D&D 5 reversed that once again because you might be saying you can't please everyone. No, D&D 5 reversed that because people were complaining we can't be evil. I mean, that's either people were complaining they can't be evil and they want you to be evil in D&D and I guess massacre children or whatever, or they just put evil in there out of brazen pandering and incompetence because they just wanted to shut people up and evil's a meaningless term to them. It has to be one of those two.
I mean, they're trying to please everybody, and then they do that, but at the same time they say the alignment is immaterial and
right. And in order to Because I've had people come up to me as a designer and say, you know, I need more monsters in the game. I need to feel good about killing something. And I've always been maintaining that the reason why we started all of this with it's okay to kill the orc children, they're evil. Because it's okay to kill things that are evil. That's why they're evil. They're labeled to kill things. And it's this idea when you said about pleasing people, the idea that since D&D is supposed to be the greatest role-playing game that appeals to people, the writers are deliberately being reductive about it. They are deliberately saying, don't think, kill.
Well, you see,
it's evil, kill it.
You're blaming the writers and you're blaming the company, but I do think that some of the blame has to be shared a little bit by the audience, because you're, like you said, people are coming up to you saying like, we need more guilt-free things to kill. They're approaching it from a power fantasy. They're taking this game that's a power fantasy game. They're imposing their own personal real-world politics onto it because it makes them feel, mostly because I think deep down it assuages a certain guilt about playing a game that is largely a power fantasy. And then they're turning on the people that create the game and say, why are you being so racist? Why are you forcing this game to be crass and cruel and simple? And ultimately, what I don't like about that is that it takes the guilt out of the people playing. The people playing the game can say, hey, we got to win. We got more diversity in the writing staff. We got orcs are no longer aligned racially. We took out racial alignments. Finally, our game is free and modern and updated and brought into the real world, modern sensibilities.
No, I
When
see.
the game hasn't changed. Like you're enjoying your guilty fantasy. You just don't have to take responsibility for it. That's the thing that bothers me.
Okay, well, see, I'm shaking my fist at that because I'm saying, like, even though, like, some people came up to me and said they want something to be evil, I can kind of dismiss those people as being, like, this is your regional group because I haven't done a big hold of this. I can only judge Dungeons & Dragons by what it is, like, by what they publish. This isn't just rules as written. This whole Candlekeep fiasco of how they took an adventure. Because if you go and Google this or read this on Twitter, you'll see that the author said, I submitted the manuscript, made all this stuff, made the neutral and the evil camps, did a big travelogue, and when I submitted to the editors, they said it was great, but then when the final came out, they removed all of it, and it's just go to this place and kill these people. So the authors of Dungeons & Dragons are presenting reductive. Even though there will be some players that enjoy that, the authors of it are presenting, like, this is the world's greatest role-playing game, and it is about being reductive. You might do something different with it, but we are, you know, as the publishers, this is what we present as the default. This is what people want. And they're also the only game that does that. And I keep pointing to the Candlekeep incident. That's one in a string of incidents where they're deliberately being reductive. It was sitting there right there in their face. They had the material right there and they threw it out the window.
Yeah.
Largely I'm not arguing your point because I think that you're right that there are trends coming from management, right? And I think they're taking some steps, whether or not they're effective is whatever. I think the specific case of the Candlekeep mystery, the Book of Cylinders is the game, and I have played it, and I did do some research on it too. To me, that reads a little bit like they cut these things down so they could fit so many of them in the book. I read about, you can't actually find the original adventure because he's not allowed to publish it because it belongs to Wizards of the Coast, which is a whole other thing about, you know, the rights of freelancers and people who contribute to these projects is what it is. Having played the game, I don't know if it's a good case study for exactly what you're saying. There are
it's one of the ones I'm using because it's the one that also made the most publicity because
it did.
I can point to other adventures that are written reductively. Like I've already pointed at Tyrant Queen. They assume you're just going to throw in with Tiamat or against Tiamat and defend freaking Waterdeep because they're oppressed.
Yeah.
They just assume that. So I don't know what they had in the cutting room floor. This is just the most public case I can show this. There's other ones I can show in the history of there were lots of stuff on D&D Beyond where the adventures are go to this place and kill these things. And like I said, I keep pointing to the written thing on their bodies. That the adventures are written in this reductive fashion. That, I mean, I think what I want to say is the big wraparound of this is the huge problem with all of this is that the bad guys are presented as evil for the sake of being evil. That they do things and go to a place and often work against their own best interests. Like Dragon Heist is one of the ones that sits with me because Eberron had this problem too, where the bad guys will literally come to kill you for no other reason other than to reveal their presence. So you can kill them and get it through.
Simplistic, and it doesn't make for a very interesting world. So
I think that is trying to solve a problem of either the characters don't have the tools to do a proper investigation because D&D is not an investigative game, or maybe they do and it's too easy. So
yeah, but I mean, I would compare that to say Pathfinder's Kingmaker, which is also like Kingmaker has the problem where they're asking players to do a lot of things that aren't technically defined in the rules, homesteading and exploration. But Pathfinder rises to the challenge in this case, and discusses what you would do and go to these different places, and how you would game this out and what skills you apply. Whereas these other adventures just seem reductive of the bad guys are evil and exist solely as bags of experience points to be murdered.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the funniest thing out of Pathfinder that I remember reading. So one of the mid modules, you end up trying to fight a warlord who's coming back to life because he has a magic sword that has a spirit in it. And if someone has this long enough, they become him and he's alive again. So you go and you stop it from happening, and it's obviously an evil item. You don't want it, and you could destroy it, or you could give it back to the tribe it belongs to. And it suggests that as an option with a positive reward and outcome. And I'm just like, okay, that I was not genuinely expecting them to put that in there. This is it's hard to describe how I feel about that because it's not a thing where it's just a good or evil thing. And then you decide, well, we are never going to see the evil thing again.
I mean,
Even in a world that explicitly states this is an evil object, you go, it is better for the world if we give it back to the people who it belongs to.
Well, you might just decide to do that as a role-playing choice. I mean, really, I think that's what's summarizing what came out of this. We have to kill the children because they're evil. I mean, D&D 5 solved that problem. There are no children in D&D 5.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, yeah, like that's the thing. If the genre is a scope that is comfortable, if you are if Nathan Drake is only shooting dudes with guns who are coming to kill him and or defile ancient tombs, then that's not a problem, right? If there's no children to kill, then it's not a problem. If you want to expand your story beyond those boundaries, the boundaries of that genre, then you got to tackle these questions. But also,
right,
I feel like the onus has to be a little bit on the people playing and engaging with those stories. They're the ones that are making it more than what was presented. That's my personal thing on, I guess.
I mean, but the game, that's but I'm, as the angry designer here, I'm complaining about the game. Like the game has this is the big thesis, the secret thesis you spring on all of us. It's like, is Dungeons and Dragons supposed to be about storytelling? By storytelling, I mean, are we just doing a stupid sitcom comedy of errors? Like, once again, Rafferty hates your favorite stream show. But also, or is it supposed to be, are we trying to do like Game of Thrones, Lankmar, Conan? Is it, like they used to sell tabletop role-playing games as a richer experience than a computer game. Theater of the mind. You don't have to do what the computer game is programmed to do. You can do anything you want. Period. New sentence. By the way, everything is clearly labeled evil, and they sit in little boxes and wait for you to kill them. And we've scrubbed anything out of this that make you feel bad about killing. We've removed those elements. So you can just heads down, crack wise as you stream all of this and murder all these monsters on your campaign. That's why I keep talking about how I'm not even sure the computer games have done that, because some of you were just talking about Dragon Age. And how much fun that is to play, and Dragon Age is full of those moral quandaries or
Mhm.
Skyrim, which is also full of those moral quandaries and largely D&D inspired. No, it's really I'm Dungeons and Dragons is the one I'm focusing on, the modern version of it, and I think to summarize up, I think they've started to realize they have a problem when they started labeling everything evil, but they removed everything about evil from the game. They removed it as a behavioral constraint. They removed it as giving you access to powers. You can be a good necromancer if you want to be, or you can be a lawful good, fathomable warlock. I drown people, but I do it according to the proper rules, and only if they're bad.
You can Dexter it, basically.
You can. Oh my God! Yeah, Dexter is. Ugh.
So let's get some ending quotes on morality here, I suppose. Rafferty, since you're already on a roll, why don't you go ahead and hit that?
The alignment index in Dungeons and Dragons was problematic to begin with and is stupid today. People remember, people got gaga over Game of Thrones. Nobody gave a care about Dragonlance, and so you can still be the good guys in your game, but instead of like just labeling the bad guys evil, how about like having them do terrible things that we actually have to stop? Instead of just labeling them evil and just calling it a day. You can have a very satisfying game if you actually engage these issues rather than just hand wave over.
What about you, Red?
I'll continue to be the villain in this conversation and say that I think everyone should be a little bit more responsible for their own entertainment. And I think that you have to, I don't think the people at Wizards of the Coast are trying to perpetuate a detrimental worldview through their game. I think they earnestly want to make a game that appeals to a wide variety of players and that lets people have fun and tell fun stories. But yeah, I think that if you have a problem with a lot of these themes, you should go a little bit deeper and consider that maybe you shouldn't be playing a game that's about stabbing orcs. Maybe if that is something that bothers you, you should really consider, what your personal biases are. When is it okay to kill? How does evil work in a world of full relativity? So, and that's me.
Yeah, gaming is for everybody, but this game, man. I'm still. I mean, the problem is that there's like multiple episodes we can strive from this. Especially the whole fiction versus reality concept, which we talked about quite a bit, but not really got into it. I think it's just you really need. I mean, to me, I think it's that they're trying to try to get the widest audience possible, and they're ultimately failing. I don't see a problem with modern. Yeah, no, we're confronting these issues, but to me, they're doing it half-heartedly. Right? They're not doing it in a consistent. Say, this is what we want to do. This is how we're going to do it. These are the reasons why we're doing it, right? And take the risk that they're going to take off people off because they're already taking people off, right? There's some people who are, bringing back the specter of the moral panic and all that, and that's a whole discussion that I don't really want to get into. But suffice it to say is that sometimes authorial intent, as Licorina says in the chat, is in fact important. Right, for no other reason that if you can either follow it or you can dismiss it, and that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, and go ahead and close it out. So, in my perspective, this is the year 2022. Morality is a discussion that we have between each other to try to find what is best for everyone to some degree, or what is right. That's the question we're asking, and it's important for us to talk about that. And it's good and even fun to have these in games because we're interested in knowing what the answer is in real life too. And we have a microcosm to experience that without really a lot of consequence. But bad things can happen when you just short circuit that. And more importantly, it can just be plain unfun to say that's not interesting and then cut it off because they're evil. So that's where I'll go ahead and leave that off. And let's go ahead and wrap up. That's going to be it for today for Notes for the Aleph. We stream episodes bi-weekly Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can join us live at twitch.tv/Ractus. We also stream and record weekly tabletop games on the same channel. Come join us when we start at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays and Wednesdays. Norm Rafferty here is a partner and writer for Sanguine Games. Check out sanguinegames.com, join us on Reddit and Twitter, and look forward to the upcoming Book of Corals. Go check out Lessons Learned at Lesson Learned 1 on YouTube, Twitter, and go check out his stuff on Amazon, where he's got a bunch of cool books that you should all go read. And don't forget to check out RedRabbit and book him for a game over at startplayinggames.com as RedRabbit. And be sure, of course, to like, comment, subscribe, and come see us all next time. Goodbye.